In the Middle Ages, people in Czechoslovakia believed that everything was influenced by the supernatural, and that for every evil force, there was a good one. The stag's horns began to glow with gold, and as the prince prepared to strike home, he was amazed by the sudden change. The stag disappeared, and his antlers were transformed. Now a golden cup stood by the well. The prince was astonished, but not afraid. He looked up and saw an apple tree growing out of the cliff. As each apple fell, out of it there rose a ghostly, beautiful girl. She tried to reach out for the water, but she was carried away before she could touch the cup. When the girl appeared for the third time, the prince instantly lifted up the cup for her, and she drank deeply of the life-giving water of the well. The prince knew that this was the most beautiful lady in the world. He must ask only her to be his bride. Kneeling humbly before her, he pledged his love, and she consented to give him her hand. Then he put on her finger the great jeweled ring, which he had vowed to give only to the one that he would marry. No one but his betrothed should ever wear it. On the crags appeared the harpies, evil birds with human faces. The prince pointed out his castle and her future home. As they set off towards it, he sounded his horn in triumph. Meanwhile, the harpies were joined by their mistress. She broke off the prince's spear tip and followed after him. Now wearing the ring herself, the witch wrapped herself in the prince's cloak and bided her time. The prince noticed nothing of what had happened. In the castle, the news of the prince's betrothal was warmly welcomed by his loyal subjects. The first ceremony before the marriage itself was the crowning of the new princess. But everyone was horrified. The face that malevolently stared out was that of an evil old witch. With a brave gesture, the prince plucked off his gown. But the ring that she wore was the ring that only his bride could wear. He could not break his word, and so he could do nothing to prevent the ill-starred match. The marriage must go ahead. And so, showing off her magic, the triumphant witch took up residence in the castle and gathered her evil harpies to her. The prince dismissed his guards and retainers, but there was nothing they could do to avert his fate. He had promised to marry the creature that wore his ring, and so his honor depended on it. He sat alone all night in a vain attempt to discover some means of honorably preventing the marriage. In the morning, the preparations for the wedding began. The bridal veil and gown were taken out and delivered into the hands of the evil old witch. And the rich hangings, carpets, and flags waved in the light breeze of what should have been the happiest of days. Faced with the strange monster, all the servants were terrified. The soldier's gesture of defiance drew down the harpy's wrath, and so in an attempt to defend himself and the others, he tried to ward it off with a staff. The witch was quick to assert her magic power and cast a terrible spell. Now there was nothing the prince or anybody could do against the evil magic of the witch. Where before there had been a happy kingdom, now the harpies directed operations under their mistress's command. The prince was in despair, but he was obliged to continue on his course to marry the witch, for she wore his ring, and he had given his word. Then, at the moment of his despair, out of the mountains where he had found the Lady of the Apple, there came a dove. As it approached, the wedding preparations magically ceased. The dove flew directly to the prince and seemed to kiss his lips. His own spear point was buried in its breast. Perhaps, if he were to pluck it out, an evil would be ended. The witch was all too aware of a threat to her power, and her harpies were quick to do her bidding. All that remained of the dove was a few feathers scattered in the wind. The prince's small ray of hope was extinguished, so he turned sadly to don his marriage robes. again he sensed a power of good in the air, and he tried to discover its source. One of the feathers had grown into a tree. It cast a bright light on the prince, who eagerly sought it out and marveled at the tree. It, too, had his spear point in its heart. Again, the witch acted quickly. Only a twig remained, and the witch crushed it.
It is I that wear your ring. Now marry me, or break your word. Come, everything is prepared.
In the last few minutes before the witch had achieved her plan to rule over the kingdom, an apple blossom was born from the tree. The apple blossom fell onto the nuptial table as the bewitched lady of the apple made her last desperate attempt. At his third chance, the prince at last acted in time. He plucked the spear point from the apple. The witch's spell was broken, and the prince's true bride was able to take her place for the marriage. With the breaking of the spell, all the witch's strength was destroyed.